Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today, I'm going to go my review of AEW's Collision. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is MJF making his Collision debut versus Kip Morst. I thought it was an okay matchup, pretty much a squash match. MJF was keeping the pace throughout the entire match, with MJF applying a submission hold on Kip Morst. Morst taps out, and your winner of the match is MJF. After the match, MJF then grabs a microphone. He pretty much mocks the crowd. He issues an open challenge with putting the title on the line. Ethan Page comes down to the ring. He mocks MJF, which leads us into an impromptu matchup for the AEW World Championship. It is Ethan Page versus MJF. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Ethan Page and MJF, with MJF keeping the pace of the match. MJF is working on the legs of Ethan Page. Page then attempts to go for an ego's edge, but his legs go out. And then MJF hits a heat seeker on Ethan Page, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still AEW World Champion, is MJF. Hats off to MJF for getting the win in that matchup and retaining the AEW World Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a Owen Hart Cup quarterfinal tournament matchup. It is Dustin Rhodes versus Powerhouse Hobbs. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Rhodes and Hobbs, with Hobbs keeping the pace of the match. QT Marshall was ringside. He ends up attacking Dustin Rhodes, with the referee being distracted. Rhodes then gets up, hits a crossroads on Hobbs. Rhodes then hits a botched code red on Hobbs in the middle of the ring. Hobbs then gets up, hits a spine buster on Rhodes. Rhodes then gets up, hits a power slam on Hobbs. QT then attacks Rhodes again, which allows Hobbs to hit a spine buster on Dustin Rhodes, pins for the 3. And your winner of the match and moving on in the Owen Hart Cup tournament is Powerhouse Hobbs. Hats off to Powerhouse Hobbs for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Miro versus Anthony Henry. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Miro and Henry, with Miro keeping the pace of the match. Henry hits an enziguri on Miro. Miro then hits a sidekick on Henry, which allows Miro to apply the camel clutch on Anthony Henry. And your winner of the match by submission is Miro. Hats off to Miro for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have Tony Schiavone in the middle of the ring. He's going to be interviewing Bullet Club Gold. Jay White and Juice Robinson come down to the ring, as well as the Gunn Club. It looks like the Gunn Club are the new additions to Bullet Club Gold. Tony Schiavone asks what's next for Bullet Club Gold. Jay White then talks about the Gunn Club. Gunn Club then hypes up Jay White and Juice Robinson. Schiavone says that Bullet Club will be banned from ringside in the match between Juice Robinson and Ricky Starks later on that night. Jay White then calls out FTR. Punk, FTR, and Ricky are shown on the Titantron, and then Punk mocks MJF and his title. A couple things I want to say about this, man. Number one, Bullet Club Gold. What Jay White's been doing since he's been with AEW, I think, has been absolutely fantastic, as well as Juice Robinson. I'm not surprised by, the Gun Club, being added to Bullet Club Gold. I think it's a great addition to Bullet Club Gold. It makes it a stronger stable. You got to give credit where credit's due, man. The Gun Club are a decent, solid tag team. And just adding them to, Bullet Club Gold, it makes perfect sense, in my honest opinion. Especially with what CM Punk's doing with FTR. And it looks like, they're adding Ricky Starks into the mix as well. So it just creates, two stables for Collision. And I'm absolutely all for it. The other thing I thought was kind of, not odd, but definitely raised a couple eyebrows, was when Punk mocked MJF and his world title. Because Jay White pretty much put on a challenge to CM Punk if he is the AEW World Championship. So I don't know how that's going to unfold between CM Punk and MJF, because, I think it was last week on Collision, Punk walked out to the ring holding a red bag that looked like it was filled with the AEW World Championship. And then MJF was walking around with the current AEW World Heavyweight Championship that he had won. So I don't know if we're going to be, start getting the wheels turning for that storyline to come back between CM Punk and MJF, which I'm all for that. And it's still yet to be seen. But all in all, again, not shocked that the Gun Club joined Bullet Club Gold. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is an Owen Hart Cup quarterfinal matchup. It is Juice Robinson versus Ricky Starks. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Robinson and Starks, with Starks and Juice exchanging in the middle of the ring. Ricky then hits a DDT on Juice. Juice then gets up, hits a sidekick on Ricky. Juice then applies a Texas Cloverleaf, but Ricky quickly breaks the hold. Juice then hits a spear on Ricky for a near fall, but Ricky gets up, hits a spear of his own on Juice Robinson. Ricky then hits a roll-up on Juice Robinson, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Ricky Starks. After the match, Bullet Club Gold are ringside after the match. CM Punk and FTR are coming down to the ring as well. Looks like we kind of have like a stare down between Bullet Club Gold and CM Punk and FTR. And it looks like the storyline is long from over between Bullet Club Gold and CM Punk, FTR, and Ricky Starks. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's for the TBS Championship. It is Lady Frost versus Chris Statlander. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Frost and Statlander, with Statlander keeping the pace of the match, with Statlander ultimately hitting a devastating tombstone on Lady Frost. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match and still TBS champion is Chris Statlander. Hats off to Chris Statlander for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Collision. It is Samoa Joe versus Roderick Strong in a Owen Hart Cup quarterfinal matchup. Number one, the winner of this match will face CM Punk in the Owen Hart Cup tournament. The match itself was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Joe and Strong, with Strong keeping the pace of the match. Strong and Joe both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Roderick Strong hitting an angle slam on Joe for a near fall. But Joe applies a submission hold on Roderick Strong. Strong taps out, and your winner of the match and moving on in the Owen Hart Cup tournament to face CM Punk is Samoa Joe. After the match, Joe gets back into the ring, attacks Roderick Strong after the match, and then Strong is taken out of the match, or out of the ring, if you will, in a stretcher. A couple things I want to say about AEW Collision, man, before I get out of here. And again, this might be a hot take, but after watching the show last night, and again, I know why Collision was formed. I know why, AEW and Tony Khan were allowed to get, another couple hours for television with, having Collision. It's all about CM Punk. And I understand that. But at the same time, too, I feel like eventually that well is going to run dry with CM Punk, in my honest opinion. I mean, a lot of people are still looking forward to seeing FTR teaming up with CM Punk against the Elite. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen at All In. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if it ever will happen. But a lot of the show was based around CM Punk, and there's some fans out there that, they love to see CM Punk back, and there's some fans that just care less if CM Punk is back at all or not. I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like a double-edged sword, man. Like, some people out there really want CM Punk back, and there's a lot of people out there that don't want CM Punk, back at all. The other thing I took away from Collision, it's just the overall feel of Collision. It kind of reminded me of a Rampage last night. And, I mean, if you guys watch Rampage, you guys know how bad Rampage does in the ratings. It's just, and even though Rampage is taped and Collision is a live show, it gave Rampage, it kind of felt like a Rampage. And with that being said, storylines are a big deal. To me, one of the best storylines, or if not the only storyline really going on right now in Collision, is this whole CM Punk, FTR, and Bullet Club Gold thing going on, which I'm not against that. But other than that, there's really no more storylines on this show that are being built. Now you have Andrade, looks like he's building a storyline with the House of Black because of the whole mask thing and everything else like that. And that's great, but you've got two storylines. And now Miro, I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Henry, but why are we not putting Miro in a more serious storyline on Collision? And that's kind of where, I'm sitting there looking and thinking, and it's like, man, why are we bringing this guy back and we're not putting him in a storyline? Miro should be going after the TNT Championship. Miro should be going after the World Championship. Why are we not putting him in a predominant storyline right now? And it just got me thinking after the show went off the air last night. It was like a lot of the show was about CM Punk. The show was built around CM Punk. And if I'm being 100% honest with y'all, man, I think that well is going to run dry here in the next few months. I just don't. If they continue to keep doing what they're doing, it's just not. I don't know where they're creatively. I don't know where they're heading towards, man. I really don't. I mean, it felt like a Rampage last night, and I know for a lot of people it's probably a hot take, but I mean, if you guys watched the show last night, man, you can't sit here and say I'm 100% wrong. It just felt like Rampage. I felt like some things were kind of rushed. I mean, and some matches were okay. I mean, the Samoa Joe and Roderick Strong match, the main event, was awesome. I thought it was a great match by both Strong and Joe. The ending of the match where Strong is getting taken out of the ring in a stretcher. You see Adam Cole in the ring with CM Punk. It was a great ending to a match. And it was a great match between Joe and Strong, man. They shut the show down last night. But other than that, man, it just felt like a Rampage. There was no, there wasn't that much excitement around the show. And I feel like, yeah, when Collision was announced and CM Punk returned, yeah, it came out red hot. But as of late, he's been back for a little while, and it's just, I mean, we've only seen him in one singles match since he's been back, and that's against him and Kojima. We need to see Punk more in a singles run. I mean, my thing is, especially if he's walking around with his AEW World Championship, if you're claiming that you're the champion, then you need to be in more singles matches. With Jay White calling out FTR for AEW Tag Team Championship opportunity last night, and that match, I believe, is booked for next Collision next week. So I don't know where CM Punk's going to fit into the fold with all this, with this storyline. He needs to have more singles matches. And to me, it just felt like it was a dull show, man. It just felt like it just wasn't no excitement with the show. And it felt like a glorified Rampage. That's just my honest opinion. And, my thing is, if this is going to, continue with Collision and everything's around CM Punk, this is not going to end well for Collision. I just don't. I'm happy that Andrade's wrestling. He's in a storyline. That's great. I think Miro needs to be in a predominant storyline as well, and not just spoon-feeding him opponents. Let's get him in a strong storyline with a build leading up to a possible pay-per-view match. Especially with All In right around the corner. I mean, you got All In August next month. Yeah, there's time, but you need to start building these storylines leading up to All In. And the other problem with All In is yeah, it should be a great show, but literally a week after All In, you have All Out September 3rd, I believe, at the United Center in Chicago. So you only have literally a week build from All In to All Out. So you got to start making predominant storylines. And my thing is what better way to build shows for All Out to build storylines on Collision? Put Miro in the storyline. Andrade's in this whole storyline with Malachi Black and the House of Black. You can build these storylines leading up to All Out. And everything else for All In can be lead up from Dynamite. I mean, they have the time to do it, so why not do it? And clearly, as far as what happened at Forbidden Door, CM Punk and the Elite were on the same show. So you can still have CM Punk and the Elite at All In. So build these storylines, man. What's gonna who's CM Punk gonna face or challenge at All In? What's the Elite gonna do? Kenny Omega has a match next week against Wheeler Yuta. You have the Blood and Guts match coming up in July with the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club. Bryan Danielson's injured with a broken forearm, I believe, so he's going to be out for probably 10 to 12 months. Who knows, man? I mean, it's just, you had to build storylines, especially with All In. All In is going to be like their WrestleMania. They got 70 to 75,000 tickets sold, I believe. It's got to be a banger of a show. And I'm not saying, Tony Khan and AEW, they disappoint with their pay-per-views, but that's a big-ass show, man. It's a really big show, and, filling a stadium like that for 75,000 people, you better damn well put on a good show. And you want guys like CM Punk, obviously, Bryan Danielson, even though he's injured, the Elite. You want this show to be, from top to bottom, just absolutely awesome. There's a rumor that Will Ospreay will be on this card as well at All In. So, if I was Tony Khan, I'll be pulling out all the stops for this All In show. Absolutely. Whether it, and again, like I just said, it goes hand in hand with storylines, man. Collision, if I was Tony Khan, and this is exactly what I would do, because All In and All Out so damn close. I mean, literally, the go-home show for All Out is literally the Dynamite, I believe, right after All In. So, what I would do is I would use Dynamite to build storylines leading up to All In. And I'm not saying don't use some matches from Collision. I'm not saying that. But to save creative time, I would use Dynamite as the premier show, obviously, to pretty much stack the card, if you will, for All In, and then use Collision for the next few weeks leading up to All Out in September to build storylines on Collision. That way, when All In's done, you have a whole other storylines that are being built on Collision that could, main event or stack the card, if you will, for All Out. You know what I mean? That's exactly what I would do, 100%, because I feel like right now, and many people have asked this too, is like, when's how do I say this? When's wrestling too much wrestling? And what I mean by that is like Tony Khan and what AEW is doing right now is they have Dynamite, they have Ring of Honor, they have Rampage, and they have Collision. It's a lot of stuff on this guy's plate. Now, credit, Bryan Danielson is a part of the creative team for Collision. Ring of Honor has Stokely Hathaway and Jerry Lynn as a part of their creative team and backstage stuff for Ring of Honor, and that's great. But Tony Khan still has say on those shows, whether it's Rampage, Ring of Honor, Collision, he still has say-so and final say on these shows. So, that's how I would do it, man, especially with All In and All Out being back-to-back. And you got to build storylines, especially with Collision. I understand the show's built around CM Punk, but you have to build storylines, man, because if not, people are really not going to be invested in really what's going on in Collision. Because, yeah, it's great to see Miro back, and it is. He's come out to Collision, and he's been phenomenal. He's had a lot of good matches, strong showing by Miro, and rightfully so. Andrade, he had a great match with Buddy Matthews. Fantastic match. Now he's in this storyline, it looks like, with, himself and the House of Black, which is absolutely awesome. But you really only have two solid storylines going on that show right now, and that's, Bullet Club Gold and CM Punk FTR, and then you have what looks like Andrade and the House of Black. Where Dynamite, you have obviously the Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite. You had the storyline with Kingston and Moxley going on as well. This little inner turmoil between Kingston and Moxley, which is great. You had the Dark Order now involved in a storyline again with the Elite, or at least Adam Page. So there's a lot of storylines going on in Dynamite. We're not getting the same thing with Collision. You got MJF teaming up with Adam Cole, and there's like a little storyline between them two. They had that backstage segment last week on Dynamite. I mean, it just compare and contrast, man. It's just Dynamite obviously is the #1 show for AEW, but there's a lot of storylines and stuff being invested on Dynamite, and I feel like we're not getting the same with Collision. And we need to build storylines on Collision that will lead to pay-per-view matches. It's the same thing, too, where people were kind of contemplating why, AEW Collision wasn't getting their own titles. I mean, I'm not for, Collision getting their own belts. I think that's absolutely just ridiculous. It's too many championships. But what I will say is that, and I said this from the beginning when Collision was announced, that they need to do a hard roster split. That roster is severely bloated. And honestly, for what it's worth, is that they could split that roster in half. Some of that roster will be on Dynamite, and some of that roster will be on Collision. And it kind of works out in both parties, man, because at the end of the day, that's not adding any more championships to Collision, or any championships at all. You can pass around the tag team belts, or just pass the belts back and forth from each show, whether it's Dynamite or Collision, and pass the titles back and forth. And then you also have people that are not getting opportunity or TV time on Dynamite that can get TV time on Collision, and build a name for themselves on Collision, and be a household name. People like Sky Blue, Willow Nightingale, and that's just to name a couple. I mean, there's so much talent. Serpentico. Now, obviously, he's on Ring of Honor. I'm just naming a couple of people that are not really getting TV time on Dynamite that could possibly get TV time on Collision. And you can build storylines. That's why I still believe that, Dynamite and Collision, they need a hard roster split. The roster is bloated. And a lot of people are not being showcased on Dynamite. So you need to split the rosters. It gets more opportunity, more eyes on the product, and it gets other talent that's on Dynamite not being showcased, possibly to be showcased on Collision, and vice versa. It builds more storylines, man. It builds more characters on Dynamite, and it builds superstars if you split the roster. But to me, last night's show on Collision just felt like a glorified Rampage, man. And with the lack of storylines and everything being built around CM Punk, and like I said, I know Collision was based around CM Punk, but that well is going to run dry, man. It is. I'm sorry. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm not a fan of CM Punk or anything else like that. It's just when you're building one show around one guy, and that's it. You're not, that well is going to run dry. Let's say CM Punk gets injured, God forbid, for another 6 to 8 months. What do you do next? You know what I mean? Because you're not building anybody else. You're not investing in anybody else right now on that show besides CM Punk, and that could become a problem. And that's why I said to you guys that with this whole CM Punk thing with Collision, that well is going to run dry. You know what I mean? Anything can happen, man. He can get injured. People can get, not really enthused about CM Punk. And right now, the fan base for AEW alone, as far as CM Punk's concerned, man, it's split. It's 50-50. There's fans out there that hate CM Punk, and there's fans out there that love CM Punk. When he had that match at Forbidden Door against Kojima, man, he was getting booed a lot in that matchup. Now, obviously, he was feeding into it. He was getting the crowd, riled up. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure not everybody's thrilled to see CM Punk back in AEW. For me personally, I mean, yeah, it's great to see him back. It gets, more eyes on the product. Still great matches on the table for CM Punk. But, again, you can't just build this show around CM Punk and storylines only for CM Punk, man. It's not going to go well for Collision if you keep doing that. Because like I said, multiple times, that the well is starting to run dry. In my honest opinion, when it pertains to CM Punk. It's great to have him back, but you got to build more storylines on Collision, man. Everything just can't be about CM Punk, because if that's the case, the show's not going to do that well, man. The ratings are going to be in the toilet for Collision, just like they are for Rampage, and a lot of people are not going to be invested in what is going on with Collision, and that's not what people want. People wanted Collision because they wanted more action and excitement from AEW. And if all we're getting is CM Punk news and storylines for CM Punk, then it just takes away from the rest of the talent that's actually on Collision. But with that being said, man, this is my review of AEW's Collision. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.